Hello, hello, hello. We are back after a brief break. One, to celebrate Indigenous Peoples Day, and two, due to the current genocide that is taking over the global stage in Palestine. But today, I'm going to try to keep it as brief as possible for you all. And if you would like to learn more about the history of Palestine and the current genocide and why it is happening, there is a link in the link tree. It is marked Free Palestine 2023, and there's an entire playlist with compilations of what you need to know in order to keep up on what's currently afoot. Now, today we're just going to review pages 45 to 52, and then next week we will rotation a quick deep dive into the history, and then the following week we'll line it up with the pages from the book. So let's get started. Start from the middle of page 45. Still discussing Madam Pleasant. Pleasant stayed in a boarding house operated by a friend from Massachusetts on Washington Street in an area called Sydneytown. The area was near the pier and was made up of boarding houses constructed from converted warehouses and abandoned ships dragged from the pier. The alleys were patrolled by thieves and muggers. Sydneytown was a stomping ground for the Sydney Ducks, a gang made up of immigrants from the British penal colony in Australia. The area was also home to Black and Irish workers who, due to the surging housing prices during the gold rush, couldn't afford to live anywhere else. Pleasant found lodging in the company of friends, which she hoped would help her avoid trouble in her new home. And I think often people forget the history of Australia and how it started off. Yes, it was a penal colony. That's why so many people take offense when they're like, oh, if you're going to criticize the United States, just leave. Because that whole just leave will make you leave thing was something that started off with the criminals. Like, oh, we're going to skew these statistics. We're going to seem like we have such a great society because everyone we feel like is of ill repute are not able bodied. We're going to get rid of. Whether through eugenics, genocide, or shipping you off somewhere else. And then doubling down on that, if you don't like it, go away, is because of the origin story that is given through revisionist history within the United States. Oh, well, the British treated us poorly and we just couldn't practice the way that we wanted to, and we couldn't do things. So we came here. We didn't like it over there. So it's, oh, if you can't change it so that people are just as tyrannical as you, move and take over somebody else's land. There, we fixed it for you. Now, more on Mrs. Pleasant. First full paragraph of page 46. So she became a moneylender. San Franciscans seemed always San Franciscans seemed always to need capital. Some were just getting started in the city after having spent their life savings to get to California. Others were spendthrifts, blowing through their money almost as soon as they earned it, binging on prostitutes, gambling, and liquor. The cash strapped nature of her fellow Californians provided an opportunity to Pleasant, who came to the city with plenty of money. She gave some of it to connected men and let them lend it out at 10% interest per month. 10% a month was a rate that, when collected upon, would more than double her capital each year. See, people think that loans and lending and payday loans, etc., are new. No, there really isn't anything new on the planet. We just get new iterations of things. And just like always, people are going to be poor with money, especially when they lack education. And when they're privileged enough to consistently have somebody that's willing to bail them out. Why would you be good with money? You see something, you buy it. Doesn't matter if in 5 minutes you still have something to show for it. Doesn't matter when the day turns into night, you may not have any place to lay your head down. The name of the game in the United States is just looking better than the next person. That's why the poorest people try to look the richest, where the richest people don't give a damn. That's why a lot of times people turn their nose up on folks that they have no idea are actually wealthy, because they look to media to see what wealth is supposed to look like, how wealth is supposed to spend. The vast majority of wealthy people spend their money on the dumbest shit possible. Hence the fact we had the chicken of the sea situation earlier this year in a submarine controlled by an off-brand game controller purchased off of Amazon. Now, societally speaking, that shouldn't have happened, because society says that's not how wealthy people work. But as you can see, even back in the day, shortly after the antebellum period, wealthy people, because she was lending to well-to-do white men that she knew from back in Nantucket so that they could lend out. Now, I'm sure they wanted return on profit also. So after, with her 10%, probably another 10%. See, are you starting to catch how interest rates work? Because you don't really believe that banks have a stockpile of cash just to lend out to you. They're lending you other people's money, and they have to pay those people for employing their money to work for the bank. Pleasant navigated the town streets on foot or by carriage, carrying thousands of dollars in currency with her at a time, moving between the Victorian homes of the north to the rough streets in the city south, making deposits and withdrawals. It's instances like this that causes me to remind people that gang members, no matter what their race, no matter what their ethnicity, no matter what their origin stories, they are smarter than you believe. They just put their intelligence towards the wrong things, depending on how you look at history, because history is full of people idolizing those on the wrong side of the tracks, but then condemning others that are on the same wrong side of the tracks. But I digress. Because they realize historically, you can send women, especially women of color, from the wealthiest of the wealthiest to the poorest of the poor, and women can assimilate easily and move virtually undetected. During the gold rush, and you heard people are scrambling for money, they're turning shipwrecked vessels into boarding houses so people have a place to lay their head. And white men are swallowing their pride and living side by side, even with all their prejudices and their racism and their sexism and everything, and borrowing money and doing business with women. Because let's not forget, this is part of one of the heightened crescents of misogyny. To get money, to be comfortable. And also because she's a woman. Middle of page 47, one of her greatest strengths was making friends. From her days as a shop clerk in Nantucket, when she had let books alone and decided to study men and women, she became a master of human connection. Because she had no choice. Just like we tell y'all, we have to learn white people better than white people have to learn themselves or their kinfolk, because it's a matter of survival. And a lot of people don't realize that along with the gold rush, there was also a silver rush. But Miss Pleasant, she kept her ear to the ground. She kept in those circles. And also keep in mind, she never let anybody know just how wealthy she had become, and she continued to work as a domestic for white folks. Because even to this day, too many white people still don't see us as human. And they'll have all of us working around them, working in their homes, working, and just let everything fly. So the top of page 48, Pleasant also got her hands on silver through California's banks. She would routinely make her way to San Francisco's financial district, a series of banks and shops near the pier, where she would enter the Wells Fargo and Company Bank. The bank was a rectangular fire brick building with wood shuttered windows. Men in top hats and jackets and the company's stagecoach were frequently out front. Inside, there was a large storeroom in the front, paneled with dark wood, and a counter in the back with a large scale on it. My custom was to deposit gold and draw out silver, by which means I was able to turn my money over rapidly. Pleasant remembered. Once Pleasant had acquired as much silver as she could get her hands on in San Francisco, she found buyers to purchase the silver for an incrementally higher price than she paid for it. Because the gold rush and the silver rush were not taking place in the same locations. So you have greedy businessmen, because the name of the game is to acquire as many trinkets as you possibly can. Doesn't matter if you can spend it all. Doesn't matter if it's liquid. Because wealthy basically live off credit. That's why credit scores are just meant to keep you in control, but we can talk about that at another time. And they're relatively recent. Most people watching are either close to the same age or older than credit scores within the United States. But like I said, I digress. So she was saving them travel time and conversion time. And because these things were new, she could pretty much set a price, because nobody really knew right off the bat at this time, what this equated to, this, what this converted to. They just knew not too many other people had it. So there was value in it. Kind of like how art dealership is now. Now, the difference in price accumulated over multiple transactions into tens of thousands of dollars in profit. In her early days in San Francisco, Pleasant was making between $15,000 and $25,000 a year, $392,000 and $650,000 respectively. Her success as an investor was a mystery to white people. Some speculated that she had such good fortune through voodoo. Others speculated that she learned to invest by trading sex for financial advice with San Francisco's rich bachelors. Another popular rumor said that she eavesdropped on business conversations during the dinner she catered. So why weren't these same men making the same profits as her? Why were they still borrowing from her? Why were they waiting to convert things over through her? In her response, I have never been given to explaining away lies, and you can't explain away the truth, she would say. The truth is that the gold rush was an opportunity that the circumstances of Pleasant's life up until that point had prepared her for. But you see what we're getting at, just like now, in 2023, and for many years leading up to this, a Black person gets successful. It's the Illuminati, it's the devil, but not white folks. And it's sad because it's even Black people that will look at a successful Black person and attribute their hard work, their natural talent, their honed talent, their intellect to some conspiracy theory, to a secret society that everybody knows about, knows all of their rituals and all of their memberships. Where's the secret? Where's the benefit if everybody knows about it? But it's not attributed to anything else. People have been so indoctrinated that they don't realize that they're harboring and spewing racism. You're perpetuating racial tropes by stating that Black people are not as capable as their white counterparts. And then you have the intersectionality of being a woman. That, oh, if she wasn't using voodoo, then, oh, she must be screwing the investors. What white man at that time would have been having sex with a non-white woman, specifically a black woman, on the heels of the antebellum period, and would be trading coitus for investments? White men knew that they could still sexually assault black women that they were attracted to with no recourse. And why would they jeopardize their reputations? Because, getting caught with a black woman, especially a domestic black woman, because they didn't realize just how wealthy she was. I keep telling y'all that. And if they did find that out, especially about a white man would have to move counties, move states to get away from the stigma. And they're in a place in California where prostitution is running wild. How many times have we referenced prostitution in just talking about being in California during the gold rush? Because, see, it was even during the gold rush and the advent of brothels that gave the Drumpf, now Trump family, the collateral to start buying. Well, the grandfather was just buying land and not really putting anything on it outside of a couple of brothels. He was just playing Monopoly. Give me the land, give me the land, give me the land, not putting a house or a hotel or nothing on there. But I digress. Now, having been reared in a boomtown that featured women and African Americans taking part in its prosperity, Pleasant had used her days in the whaling years of Nantucket to prepare her for the gold rush of San Francisco. And see, while white people were putting all their energy into trying to steal the wages from or thinking that they were getting over on black whalers, black people were sitting back like, hold up. And black women had a bigger leg up and a bit of a head start regarding the workforce over white women, because white women didn't have to work. Now, the downfall is, even though black women, through slavery, through, having to work because being forced into single parenthood, or just being single because during antebellum, either their children were killed, their husbands were killed, they were sold off, they couldn't reconnect because they didn't just have the money or the means to just travel the country. And because they were being lied to so much, there was a lot of uncertainty as to where they were free in this burgeoning country for a very long time. There were people in 1960s that were still on plantations that didn't realize that they were free. And some of them were just afraid to leave because they weren't sure how much of the country was free. So the one downfall about having all this experience and having a leg up, just like black men, is not knowing what proper pay was. But they knew how to make the money. They knew how to hustle. They knew how to save the money. Because they knew money today does not mean money tomorrow. Where even at that time, the poorest white person always thought, well, I got a shilling. I've always had a shilling. So I can spend it down to a shilling. That's why even now you see so many white people keeping themselves in poverty because they're looking to keep up with the Joneses instead of saving. And that's why they're so quick to criticize each other on their purchases, not on clothing or shoes or where to live, but snacks and coffee choices. Now, I want to leave you with this because I really want you to think on this. And this is coming from page 51. Compare Sam Ward with the only black millionaire in New York. I mean, Jerry Hamilton. And it is plain that manhood is a nobler ideal than money. The former has illustrated his people and his country. The other has fled from his identity, to use the elegant phraseology of Ethiop, like a dog with a tin kettle tied to his tail. Wealth and activism were binary characteristics, Smith argued, in the United States' most distributed black newspaper of the antebellum period. One could either seek liberation or seek wealth, not both. As she often did when presented with two conflicting ideas, Pleasant harmonized them as only she could. She set her mind to pursue wealth, but to the end of using the money she made to seek liberation for slaves, as she had promised her husband to do so. Around the time that Smith printed his treatise on Hamilton and Ward, Pleasant began to become interested in the name she saw printed in the papers: John Brown. And as much as neoliberals love to toss about John Brown as if he was one of the greatest white hopes and greatest white saviors that there was, remind them that he was so poor with money and organizing that he had to rely on the ingenuity of a black man, the scheduling of a black man, and the money of a black woman. Now, like I said, we were going to try to keep it as short and sweet as possible this week. Thank you for joining me. Hope to see you next week. And as always, each one teach one, each one reach one. Till next week.